Hello and welcome to Faith Unfiltered podcast. My name is Blake Smith and I'm the host for this episode of What's Brewing. What's Brewing is a podcast series within Faith Unfiltered where we ask the question, what is mission and why do we do it? So I am here today with some new friends of mine, Thomas and Brooke Schlenker, and they are pastors of the Highland Park congregation in Greater Pacific Northwest Mission Center. I'm going to let them tell you more about that in a few minutes, but I'm just really glad to have them and to sit down and have a chat and talk about some of the exciting things they've been doing there at Highland Park. So welcome, Thomas and Brooke.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Really good to have you. And just to make everybody who's listening jealous, we are recording this episode at Samish Island Campgrounds in Bow, Washington, which is absolutely beautiful. If you haven't been, you should try to find a way to get up here sometime.
And if you hear kids playing in the background, that's why.
Yes, I was very excited the first night when we got here to see how many children there were. That's amazing. So that might be another podcast at some point, but right now, we want to hear something about Highland. So first of all, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself so that they know who we're talking to.
All right. So yeah, I'll go first. Like you said, I am Brooke Schlenker, and during the day, how I fill my time, I used to be an educator. I stepped away from that about 3.5 years ago, almost 4. And I now work for the Greater Pacific Northwest Mission Center as the communications and administrative specialist, which what falls under that is director of communications and then director of camping ministries.
And everything else has to do.
Yes. So never a dull moment. And, as many people can probably relate, a very long to-do list. And so I love working for the Mission Center. Great team. It's flexible. And so I get to have our daughter at home with us. And we live about 20 minutes south of Seattle.
Yeah. And I'm Thomas Schlenker. In the day job, I'm a teacher. Now middle school PE. I've taught a couple different things. And in the church bubble, other than serving as pastor at Highland Park, just helping out where I can at whether it be at spec and doing delegation staff or teaching spec today or things like that there, or at camps and retreats and things like that around the Northwest as needed. And I used to be a lot more active in other things. Like I was a coach for a long time. That was a career of mine. But I've just phased out of that. I went back to it for a couple of years and now I'm phasing back out because it was a lot of time away from family. So we hung up that towel and moved on to other things.
That was college athletics, right?
So my career in my 20s was I was college athletics, and then left that to become a teacher because it was a lot easier than bouncing around the country 3,000 miles at a time. And then went back in and I coached a club in Seattle for a few years. But yeah, with pastoring and teaching and parenting and husbanding and all of that, it was time for me to say pause again to coaching. So I stepped back from that a couple months ago.
You needed at least one less hat.
Yep, one less hat.
I get it. Well, Brooke, you're wearing a bunch of hats yourself, and something some of our listeners might be aware of if they have taken a registered youth worker training. You may have taken it from Brooke unknowingly at the time. Well, you would have known who she was, but Brooke has also recorded youth worker training that's used in a number of jurisdictions for their youth workers. So, hey, listeners, if you're looking for a training, but as we found out this week, if you take the training, that does not mean you don't have to apply. You still need to apply anyway, but that's not what we're here for. Let's talk a little bit about Highland. Give us some background about Highland congregation. What got you to the point where you guys took on the pastor role?
Yeah, so I've only been with Highland Park for 10 or 15 years. Its history goes back decades and decades. But it's got an interesting one because when the Highland Park then RLDS, but now Community of Christ group started, and there will be people listening to this that were part of this, so they might know the story much better than I do.
Yes.
So in the comments,
Send your corrections to Thomas, not to Faith Unfiltered.
but yes. So the building we're in, they needed a home base. They needed an actual building to meet in, and so they actually found it was a former lodge of some, I don't remember which one. It wasn't Elks, but it was another community organization like that. They found that building and relocated it to where it is now.
Wow. Then,
long after that, dug out the foundation underneath, and that's what became our basement space. So it's had a couple different
did it in reverse.
Yep, they did. And so there has been a progression of things to create the home that our congregation, or our building that our congregation calls home. But then it had many members. It had gone up and down. It had very few members. And then about 5 years ago, give or take, there was an influx of a few families that had returned to the area or had just moved back, or had still lived in the area but had shifted to another congregation and really wanted to find their way back. So our numbers went from 4 to 6 to 25. And we took a look at what we needed to do and tried to find where we should go next. And that was kind of where we transitioned into the pastor role and started trying to find what the next step was going to be.
All right. So as I've heard the story told, and I don't know if this comes from both of you, I do know that it was credited to Brooke at least, but this willingness to say yes, this, just without making excuses, without thinking about it too much, just say yes. Tell us a little bit about that, Brooke.
Yeah, and I think that goes for both of us. I want to say we're so lucky to have a group of people who are willing and wanting to try new and different things. I would call us kind of some dreamers. And so, like having an idea of let's get together and start a choir. And I mean, we're not a big group, right? But it's like, yeah, sure. Like, go for it. And so we had a choir for a while. That kind of ebbs and flows of when we get together. But we're like, we have all of these youth, but we don't have a solid like Sunday school class or something. So what if we try a youth class just on the first and third Sundays of the month? Sure. Why not? Run with it. Like, why not say yes when you are trying to grow and find what your community is needing and wanting? And some of those things, like book studies or, priesthood meetings, like start off really solid and then fizzle out. And so it's like being able to I think of my days as an instructional coach of the teaching and learning cycle. Like, you're always evaluating where you're at and then what modifications do we need to make? What do we have too many ideas going? Let's hone in and fine tune some things. But being able to just say yes and try something to see if it works or tanks, like you have to know. So I would also say we're not a very traditional congregation, and so very, very relaxed in trying something new and okay if something goes kind of messy.
Yeah, well, and the way a lot of the changes have happened is, well, I don't know how to phrase this more eloquently, but rather than trying to overthink it, it's, somebody would say, hey, how about this? And we'd all look at each other and just say, great idea, let's try it. instead of, well, we need to put a plan together and we need to, let's plan out 38 songs before we ask who wants to be in the choir. It was, hey, who wants to sing? And then we all went in the other room, and one of our members, Christy, spearheaded the, hey, let's try this song this time. And that was what it was. So not putting too much pressure on ourselves to deliver a perfect product every time we tried it. It was very much, yeah, sounds good. Let's try it. And if it crashes and burns it, and we'll figure out what went wrong and we'll fix it next time, or we'll come up with a different idea, which took the pressure off of that planning phase and that fear of failure, because, we're just trying something out. And some things have crashed and burned, like the book study, for example. It started off great for about 3 weeks, and then out the window it went because people were busy and
I would like to
conferences
clarify,
happened.
we did finish the book.
Yes.
We did get through it.
Yeah, the books and our priesthood meetings.
Yes.
And because we had one or two, and then it became, hey, we're all busy. Let's bounce some emails back and forth. And, it's important that the priesthood touch base and have that conversation and that dialogue. We don't necessarily need to be in a room together every time, which there's an element of that that's really important to maintain that connection and fellowship and that relationship.
And being filled and learning. Yeah.
But if it could have been an email, let's make it an email. And then that way, when we do need to say, hey, we need to sit down and discuss this face to face and have a dialogue, then it's a lot more meaningful rather than just sit and look on your phone about all the things that are just bullet points that we need to know. But the real conversation can happen face to face, that the nitty gritty stuff you really need to actually dig into.
And I would say too, our group is very aware of where everyone is at in life. We have kids in our congregation ranging from 2 to 17. And they're all very active in different activities. And so knowing that, life happens, and that doesn't always mean you're going to be there on a Sunday morning or available on a Wednesday evening, and so knowing that everyone is still very invested and on the journey, but maybe not always physically there. And so I think that kind of goes along with some of the meetings that are not as consistent as we would always like them to be, but being very aware that life and, we are a community, we are a family, we get it. So we support where we can.
So it sounds like at the heart of it, in addition to just the willingness to say yes, is the idea of being willing to pivot or adapt or give permission, and not be so rigid on each other that you can't function.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Yeah. We are fortunate in being able to have conversations about change that might feel really sticky in other situations or other groups, but we're kind of like, well, let's figure it out. Like, why not figure it out? Anything you...
Well, and just to your point about where will your spirit lead today, and being fluid and adaptable in that way. And we were just having this conversation. Brooke and I were just having this conversation yesterday or the day before about, and we've had this conversation many times, but I forget, somebody on this podcast will remember this, but I was listening to an interview about somebody who was reflecting on their time. It was an actor reflecting on their time with, I forget who it was, some phenomenal actor like Helen Mirren or Denzel Washington or Daniel Day-Lewis, somebody that just a phenomenal. And it was about them. It was about a scene that had been highly improv. And it was about, when you think about improv, or you think about following this, where the Spirit will lead, sometimes we can default into the, well, then let's just feel it out and find out where it leads us. And their reflection, this actor's reflection on working with, and I forget that, the phenomenal, amazing actor, but they were talking about that amazing actor and how they improv so much during that movie or during that scene, but the whole movie. And it was very much a, no. They didn't walk in and just make it up. They knew, they had a plan. And then they felt where their character would go naturally. And so they didn't walk in unprepared. They walked in highly prepared, and then adapted as needed, because they were so ready and they had reflected so much and they had prepared for it so much. And so on a, whether it be a Sunday worship, or whether it be where your congregation is going, or where something is happening in life, it's the idea that, yeah, we need to be receptive to where the Spirit might be leading us, but that doesn't mean just walk in and say, well, let's see what happens. You know, you have a plan, but when you feel, at our congregation, we felt early on when many of the current members had come back, we decided, okay, we need to actually just sit down and talk with each other to get to know each other. So we would have coffee hour beforehand. And then we noticed that there was kind of an awkward transition of us having all really good conversations, getting to know each other in what we turned into the coffee house. And now we all, refilled our coffees, and then we went in and did the formulaic scripted service. And we did that for a little while, and then we realized, wait, why don't we just sit around the coffee tables and have our conversations right there about what our theme is for the week. So that's that. We had prepared a service. We have prepared what's happening but if the conversation really takes us somewhere else, we follow it and we go down that path and we feel it out. And that's a Sunday morning service example of that. But there really is an element that needs to be open to kind of rolling with the changes as they come. And that's uncomfortable in many ways. But the way you make it comfortable is you prepare so well that you're comfortable deviating from that path.
Yeah.
You know, if you know the map so well going home, you can take a slight detour. That's the scenic route.
Right.
But if you don't know where you're going, you're looking down at your phone and following Google Map directions and what's your navigator telling you from the passenger seat. And if you know the map, you can deviate and you can find your way.
Yeah, so there's this unconscious competence integrated into who you are and how you are as a community. So you don't have to think every detail, because it's kind of like in the morning when you go in to get a cup of coffee, you open your cabinet and you reach in and you grab a cup. You don't think about, what cup should I grab today? Or how do I open this door? It's just natural.
Right.
So, yeah, that's great. I want to step back just a minute, talking about the risk. Brooke, you mentioned sometimes it doesn't feel like a risk, and that's really interesting, because I think some of the things that I'm aware that you guys do in some places would be like risk doesn't even begin to capture. I mean, that's so uncomfortable that I'm going to have a coronary. How I can't even think about it. It's so risky. So I'm interested when those kinds of things become natural process that we just do it. It's not even risky anymore to do this. Do you still run into things that are risky? Do you feel like you're still pushing the boundaries, or have you kind of gotten into a rhythm now where that's doesn't feel as risky for you, but might be completely just overwhelming for someone else?
I don't know. I think maybe there's some things that might still feel risky, but I'm having a hard time thinking of any. Honestly, I think we're so open, or, like, yeah, like having what we call coffee house church, just sitting around the tables and knowing that might be very uncomfortable for some people who might walk through our doors and, see our sanctuary, but we're all around tables, or having work days where we're like, you know what, we have decided as a group that we always want to make sure we have the prayer for peace and disciples' generous response within our worship, whatever that might look like. Or, painting and like kind of rededicating a classroom for our youth. But gosh, yeah, I am having a hard time thinking of anything that is feeling super risky within our group.
Yeah. Well, and I think our group approaches ideas in a unique way, which is oftentimes, and pastors, members, advisors will struggle with this, but it's if you're feeling there might be a need for a change or an evolution or an adaptation, or something's just not going quite the way that you want it to, or you hope it might, that there's a change needed. And then we get stuck in the difficult position of what is that change? And though some of those are really risky and we're not going to do them, but some are safe. And I don't know if many of our members think of it that way. Mm-hmm. It's it's less, we're in this concrete zone and we need to change to another concrete zone. It's more, it's not seen as change from one to the other. It's just seen as what is needed in the moment. Mm-hmm. And so, and organizations of any kind, but churches are among them. Organizations, in this context, church, a congregation doesn't die because it made a series of wrong changes. It dies when it stops making changes, or it struggles when it stops adapting. Am I making the right choice? Making a choice is the right choice. And if I mess it up and we do something wrong and we, whatever the situation might be that we did wrong, I don't know. That's just information. Now we know, hey, this didn't work. And we've had those Sundays mm-hmm. where, we walk away and, but many of us look at each other and like, oh yeah, that worked, that resonated. Or we kind of go,
won't do that again.
Nope, not doing that again. And you just take the information in, and it's not a complex question. It's, did everyone feel connected and inspired today? No. If they did, then something went right. Even if all we did was talk about life over coffee and never even got to a scripture theme or concept.
And this just kind of popped into my head of thinking too of risk that might seem very small, I guess, to our group. But, when you're in a very traditional setting or different settings, we have people who are I would say everyone is very comfortable about just asking a question if something is unclear. And so whether it be because we don't usually have like a formal sermon or message. We have sharing thoughts, but someone, facilitating it to mm-hmm. start it off and to have kind of that overview of a scripture or the theme, whatever we're focusing on. And so it's a very, I think we had it on, maybe this was said in a worship here at Reunion, like a TED Talk sermon or something. I don't know where I'm pulling that from, but very just concise, and everything that then leads into our deeper conversations around the tables. And but just, I love that people will just be like, wait, that doesn't make sense. Or like, can you tell me more about this? And so for us, like I don't think we really see that as a risk. But I can see where in different settings, like even, growing up, I wouldn't just ask a question during the service, and because that was not in the bulletin, like there's no Q&A at that moment in time, like, and so
The agenda doesn't say that.
The agenda doesn't say that. And so, but being able to like, honestly, like see where the Spirit is leading you. If you don't understand, like, what is the Doctrine and Covenants, or what is this? And so I feel like there's always learning and growth together. And definitely an environment where that is welcomed. And, even with our, friends of the congregation that come, not, every Sunday, but they're there a couple of times a month. They're participating, they're asking questions. And so, it's a very different setting than I think you would walk into a lot of Sundays, which can feel a little uncomfortable, right? Like you are not expected, right? But there's a little bit more of a demand for engagement than just sitting in a pew and hearing and singing and
and a lot of that, where an organization or a community might have that fear of that opening up and having a dialogue. Church leaders, community leaders, whatever format your organization is meeting in, we have two challenges with that. Is one, we have to shift that mindset if that's there, but two, we're also usually the causes of it. Either ourselves or our predecessors built that culture into the organization of, you're going to sit and get and not, I get up and say a prayer when it's my turn, but otherwise I sit in the pew and I look one direction. I had to do this when I taught high school math. I realized a couple days in a row, like 2 or 3 days in a row, I was at the front for 30 minutes straight in some of my classes. And I'm like, this is too. So then I stayed after one day and I rearranged my classroom so there wasn't a front to the classroom. Because if there was a front of the classroom, I stood at and I talked. Mm-hmm. And so I put them all in circles. I put them all, like, not even in small groups where there's a front. I faced them the opposite direction. Right. And then I wasn't putting up, it made me catch myself. So I didn't stand up there and do it. One thing we tried early on in us planning services was we were still in the sanctuary and we turned the pews to face each other. Mm. And it was a shock to some people. And that took some changing, because that was a space that had not changed in a long time. And in a congregation that doesn't and I don't think every congregation should do these things, but I think every congregation should do what is needed by their members. And figuring out what that is a difficult challenge. So what we often do is we just do it the way we've always done it, right? Which is there's one person at the front. And it's not because that's what we necessarily need. It's simply because that's what we've always done. And so finding a way, if you're leading a service or if you're leading a gathering of any kind, finding a way of almost deprogramming all of your members from that way it has always been, just so you can figure out together, all right, what do we need next? Do we need to sit around tables in the coffee house and talk? Or do we and there's going to be a difficult road to get past it. But once you're past it, what is actually needed? Because there's always that unease from the leaders and the members of anytime there is change when there hasn't been.
Right.
And so to get over that fear, that risk, that unease is you almost have to make change the norm. Not uncertainty, not, oh, who knows what's going to happen, but just that you have to become comfortable with that change or comfortable with that discomfort, because that's what actually causes growth. If you're not, if you don't stress that system, it doesn't evolve and grow and become stronger and deeper. And
there's another piece that I have heard kind of hinted at a couple of times, and that is essentially the willingness to fail, recognizing that that's going to happen. I wonder, because I think that is something that holds people back significantly, especially in a culture where, success is so important and looking good in front of others, that kind of thing. So has that been a part of who you guys are, your personality from birth, that you're, hey, I don't care if I fail? Or is there some aha moment along the way where you thought, hey, this didn't kill me, so maybe we can let this happen?
Growing up, I mean, you and your brothers, Brooke's brothers and her joke about this all the time, but I think my family and hers were both pretty competitive. But there was also a sense of how important failure is toward, and whatever it might be, whether it be athletic competition, which is one common concept, but in music, we all played music as kids, and but just that, yes, I don't like failing. It's not a good feeling.
Not my comfort zone.
Okay, so they're not listeners, they are not superhuman. They are uncomfortable with failure. They just allow it to happen.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is you getting comfortable with the discomfort of failure, because, and I use this example all the time with my athletes, with my students. I mean, Brooke and I have talked about this in our own lives. Like, if you look at the top, I'm a middle school teacher, so every kid wants to be in the NBA, right? And you look at, okay, name the top 5 scorers in the NBA. And they all, and there's always a debate. Some people say Jordan, some people say LeBron James, some people say Kobe Bryant, and there's a few others that they always list. And right now it's LeBron James. And like, okay, cool. Who's missed more shots ever than anyone in the history of the NBA? And they're all, and they can't really figure it out. And it's LeBron James. And if you look at the top 10 scorers in the NBA of all time in history, Kobe Bryant's right there, Michael Jordan's right there. They're also usually pretty high up in the missed shots category. And it doesn't matter how many different ways you phrase this. Look at we were talking about actors and I was talking about actors and actresses earlier. Look at some of the phenomenal, amazing actors and actresses like you've seen, just amazing performances that inspired you or inspired change in the world. And then you look at their career, even early career, obviously, but even later on, they made bombs sometimes.
Right.
And it happens, and you've got to risk it a little bit. And you've got to go out on a limb to get some stuff done.
Yeah. And I would definitely say I don't live in failure comfortably, to put it lightly. And I am a person who likes things just so. But I think teaching kindergarten for a long time helped me work through some of that. But, one thing I think, just going back to just saying yes, takes that pressure away almost, for not only myself, but for others. And thinking too about around, the Christmas season and things of one thing that we've done is instead of having, the Christmas pageant that has been rehearsed for a month ahead of time and people have memorized their lines and everything, we have done for a couple of years now where I've just narrated a play, and whoever is there on that Sunday can jump in and be a character, and they just act it out. So your group has to be comfortable with that, because it's not going to be perfect by any means, but entertaining, yes. Do we have some, people playing the donkey or other animals if other people want to jump in on that scene? And so I think it gives that access point to how involved like a youth or an adult wants to be in something like that, but also opens it up for, if you weren't here every single Sunday leading up to this point, it doesn't mean you don't get to be in the pageant. And so I would say just being able to accept those missed shots, right? And knowing that every time that flick of the wrist, it might go beautifully through the net, or you might completely bank it. So I mean, it has taken a lot to be able to get to this point, or at least for me, to, kind of let go of some things of knowing like, it's not going to be picture perfect, but we're all growing, we're all learning, we're all getting fed in different ways. And taking that definitely has been a risk for me, but I feel like we mentioned earlier, it's not, it doesn't really feel like a risk so much anymore.
One or two of the about trying increasing one or two of the really big risky things that actually help transform the congregation, that had a positive response that maybe you were surprised by.
Well, we talked about one of them, which was just shifting from the formulaic, like
Going into
and born and raised, and if you've been in community Christ for more than 5 years, you could close your eyes and write a bulletin.
It is not worship unless you have sung 3 hymns that all have at least 7 verses.
Yeah, all of them played as a slow dirge. And
now, careful.
Yeah. But that's the thing is play it the way you want it.
Yeah.
You don't have to play it one way. If whatever the song might be. And but just shifting from that formulaic sitting in one spot to the coffee house, which is not something every congregation should do, but it's something every congregation has to consider. You have to consider the reality of where you're at and the possibilities, and then make a decision so that maybe you do stay with the exact same formula of church every Sunday, but you should do it intentionally because you chose that, not because you just fell into it 30 years ago and have stayed that.
And I think we've also had a lot of conversations as a group of what we want our worships to look like. And like I said, we've always said we for sure always want the prayer for peace, disciples' generous response, but also then kind of breaking our Sundays down into like learning, the first Sunday, learning Sunday, but the first Sunday of the month, taking just a moment in the service to talk about the different one sacrament that we practice within Community of Christ. Another Sunday, looking at like a world church profile. And so that we are learning about the people that we are in community with, even though we don't see them on a daily basis. A learning Sunday of trying to, do some learning series of Like we are going to be working on prophetic imagination. We've kind of started that a little bit, but we want to
Yeah, we
go
paused
deeper
those over
into
the
it.
summer.
Yeah.
Because everybody's in downtown.
And then, you know, service Sunday, well, where we're just doing something that's needed in the neighborhood. We're right across the street from an elementary school and a city park. And then fifth Sundays is the youth plan a service. So, you know, nothing like super innovative or like completely out of the box, but just mixing it up to also try and meet everybody's spiritual needs. But also just giving it, I guess we also talk a lot about how we are putting our mission initiatives and enduring principles into action and where they fit into everything. And that's some like deeper work that we want to kind of dive into, that Thomas and I have talked about with each other, but trying to really make sure everything is just woven
being
together.
real intentional about it.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, and I love that one. Those are two of the big things to your question, and this is the uncomfortable part that everybody is gonna laugh at. The real work is us and everybody else in the congregation being comfortable with those moves and changes. And that's that big reflection work that people need to do. And everybody, we are still doing it. Everybody needs to do that, on that, being comfortable with it, because again, it's like shifting into coffee house church or having a very simple structure to how we're going to break down each Sunday throughout the month. And some of those changes are what worked for us, but it might need to be something different for a different congregation. But what's going to have to be consistent across all of them is being comfortable with trying those things and making those changes, that's a lot of internal work. That's not necessarily changing up the agenda on Sunday.
Yeah.
That's being okay with changing up the agenda on Sunday,
right, sure.
which is the real challenge.
And being able to keep the focus, right? Like I mentioned earlier, we are a group of dreamers and some doers, but making sure that we're not just dreaming, but, you know, honing in and focusing on like, okay, what can we accomplish right now? And then knowing that that accomplishment will lead to more. And so, you know, it is kind of that ripple effect, but that it goes back to what you were saying, Thomas, about that being able to improv, but because it's so well known or planned, that it isn't just sporadic and chaotic, right?
Right.
And so being able to have a grand idea, but knowing where we need to begin and where we need to focus, and keeping that conversation focused and not going off on other ideas. Because it can be a messy web when you really start dreaming and thinking.
Yeah.
And so just bringing it back to the center of like, okay, this is our focus right now. It's not that we're not going to get to these things out here, but we have to start here, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if you could whittle down all of your learnings, maybe it's not possible, but if you could give a piece of advice to a congregation who's kind of struggling, maybe they acknowledge the fact that they might need change, but they're just not sure, what advice would you give to them?
Well, we discussed the yes earlier. That was our yes to stepping in. But so if you're in any leadership position within your organization, that means somebody's following you. Like a leader is just the person being followed. That's it. And so there's an element of you saying yes to that position and that role, and you accepting the responsibility of knowing that other people are following you. Being willing to say yes to taking on that mantle of leadership is part of it. But the formal leadership managerial role of being a pastor is there are some duties that the pastor has to do, but coming up with all the ideas for church is not one of them.
Yeah, and I would say if you are in a spot where you're feeling the urge that something needs to change, you're in a good spot. Like you've already started that reflection process. But then being able to really, and maybe it's not even having to be able to like truly look in the mirror and be like, am I part of a roadblock, or am I a part of leading a journey? And so really knowing too, like in those leadership roles, because there's so many opportunities for leadership within any organization, but church and congregations, are the right people for this time in the right roles, or does there need to be a little bit of a shakeup? Which in itself is risky, right? To even bring up that conversation or feeling that way, because it's not saying you failed, right? It's looking at our greater community thinking, we're not where we want to be. What's going to get us there? And so being able to truly reflect and think, what road do we need to start on that might make that change, and who's in a position to really lead us, which is hard conversations to have. But once you are kind of in those positions, right, you can be a championship team if you want to be, right? But knowing that that team is going to change.
Great. Before we wrap it up, I want to ask you, what is the greatest hope for the church, or if you want to keep it to the congregation, what's your greatest hope going forward?
Within our congregation specifically, I like thinking of the building itself as a clubhouse for the community that we are, and figuring out how we can better use the clubhouse to serve the community rather than the clubhouse being the point. And if we can utilize that better to serve not just the community that we have within our congregation, but the surrounding community around us, and finding a way to actually serve the community around us better with all of our resources, not just the building we have that the community should be utilizing as a resource, but us as a resource and us as servants within that community that can build a broader connection with that small, and it's a neighborhood in a very large city, but it's still just one small neighborhood. So building those connections would be nice.
Yeah, and I would say that is a hope of mine as well. But also within GPNW, and especially around the Puget Sound area, we have a fair amount of congregations. And so I hope that I have is that, maybe Highland Park can be the spark of this, of doing more together to be able to pull more resources and just people, right? Being able to support our communities around where we are, but coming together more often for just fellowship, but also learning and growing and not just being separate congregations that then come together at reunion or mission center conference or things like that, but truly being one. And then I think that then leads us to a better, almost not a better connection to world church, but that reminder, right? That we are a world church, and like opening our doors and sharing our love and our vision and peace. I mean, I love the community of Christ. I love what we share and believe. And, you know, we have a place at the table for you and a cup of coffee or tea ready for you. We want to hear your story and help you grow, and you can help us grow.
And refocusing that perspective to see more than just one building at a time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great. Well, you heard the invitation here, listeners. If you're in the Seattle area or passing through the Seattle area, check out Highland Park. They've got coffee or tea waiting for you, and maybe an opportunity to say yes to something that you've hoped for. I want to thank Thomas and Brooke for being with me here today at the table to talk about Highland Park and to be a part of the What's Brewing series and Faith Unfiltered. Guys, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and give us a glimpse into Highland Park and all that is possible. We really appreciate that.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. You've been listening to What's Brewing, part of the Faith Unfiltered podcast, and we are just so glad that you took the time to spend some time with us today. We hope that as you process what you've heard and join us again in the future, that you will find ways to go out and make the world a better place. Take good care. We'll see you soon.